Okay, good morning, everybody. It's great to see so many people in the audience, if a little terrifying. But as Gosia said, welcome to our first session, user documentation versus loser documentation. Great content, no readers. So, as she said, I'm Cate Mackenzie, and I am community content editor at Appway. And this is my colleague, Dirk. Well, we're just trying to fix the clicker and get the slides to move. It's not working.
The clicker, is it off or?
Exactly. Is it on? Is the thing on?
We fixed the problem.
Fix the problem. Okay.
There we go.
So there we go. There's our names. And now I'll hand over to Dirk to continue the introduction.
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Dirk. Thanks for the great introduction, Gosha. And I want to give you a bit of context because we're talking about problems and about solving problems, hopefully at least. And I just want to tell you a bit about how we reach this problem of user and loser documentation. So what happened is we're working for a company called Appway, and what we produce is a platform which simplifies building online applications or solutions. So about a year and a half ago, we had the idea that we need to really revamp the way we present our documentation and also the way we manage it. And it became pretty clear that we're going to do that in-house, build it ourselves. So that's great news because you get all the features you want if you ask for them. But it's also a lot of responsibility, and you really need to think about everything you're doing. So we kind of turned around every stone and really analyzed the whole situation. What happens then is that you have a bunch of different things going on, and you really have to decide in which direction to go. So we start to think about what do we really want to do, and we thought about all the normal staples that you would think about, like we need a versioning system, we want some kind of review cycle, we need to migrate our content from the old system, which is very painful, as anybody who's done a migration before knows. We need to manage links, images, and so on. And all of these things were designed to build and provide great content. And I mean, I think we probably all agree that good or even great content is kind of the foundation of any help system. I mean, who here produces great content for their users? Any hands? A lot of hands. I do, I hope. So, yeah. So this is where we were, and then we start to think more. Is this really the only goal that we have, is to produce great content, or do we need to think of more things? Because it's really easy to fall into that trap to say, hey, I've written that manual, I've put it out, I've saved it into some folder, done something with it, game over, move on. And nowadays, I think, if you just do that, you're taking a big risk to produce what we've called loser documentation. And that can be really good content, really powerful content, but it just doesn't make an impact. Users don't read it, they don't benefit from it, they're not interested, it somehow doesn't make it to them. There's a gap there somehow, and that would really be a shame. And so we started thinking about what can we do to get user documentation, which is an empowered user, a guy who can use their application, bring value, and has a lot of fun.
Okay. So, the 4 different topics that we identified, which we found along the way are probably vital in helping you avoid this loser documentation trap. It's findability, analytics, user testing, and engagement. So, we just want to say this is a journey that we're on. We're not know-it-alls, these aren't all the answers, and I'm sure you've also got loads of great ideas. But we thought today we'd share our ideas, what we've learned along the way with you here at SOAP. So Dirk, over to you.
Okay. So, first topic, findability. So you see this guy, he's just looking for something, right? Probably one of those great pieces of documentation that you've provided. Let's look at the problem a bit more abstractly. So you see this guy, I think, with a nice red and white shirt. It should be pink for SOAP, but fortunately it's red. So this is Wally, and he's, let's say, a symbol for your great content. It's technically accurate, it's complete, you've written, you've followed all the rules in the style guide, it's really good stuff. And it's just waiting for users to come and devour it and gain value from it. The problem is, he's not the only one. You have a whole group of people. And what that looks like is something like this. Can anybody find Wally in this massive information? You found him already, so I'll just hop over here. You can see he's hiding there. And so this is kind of what your users sometimes encounter, because you obviously have a big help system, they're looking for a very specific answer, and it just gets lost in the chaos and in maybe not the chaos, but the amount of information you're providing. And that's the findability trap that we need to avoid. So I want to mention a few things how you can avoid that. Site search. So maybe first of all, when you hear the words search and computer in one sentence, what do you think of? Is there any association? Google, yeah. Okay, let's say internet search engine. We don't want to be promoting any individual vendors. But anyway, it's Google. And Google is a very powerful tool. And that's really the benchmark that your users set. That's kind of the expectation they have when they come to your site and they search something, because that's what everybody uses on a daily basis. Now, the bad news is that's a pretty complex thing to do. And search is not an out-of-the-box functionality that you just plug in and it works. And even if you work with developers who are very skillful, they're going to ask you a lot of questions how you want your search to work, and you need to be prepared to address those. So I just want to go through a few points I think that are really important when you think about how to build a site search. The scope. Obviously, you wanted to search all your help topics, right? But maybe you have a forum that also has relevant content. Maybe you have some kind of public support tickets that could be helpful. Maybe you have white papers, some kind of marketing materials. There can be all sorts of things that you might want to include in the search. And if you want that to happen, you need to talk about that early on and include that in the project. Weighting. So this means really, how does the search engine decide that something's particularly relevant? If somebody puts in a keyword, how does the search engine know, okay, this is what I want to return first? So the typical things are if the term turns up in the header or in the first, 150, 160 characters of a page, that's weighted higher than others. But you could also have other criteria like the content that you've recently updated or content written by a certain person. There can be all sorts of different things you can put in there. Again, your developers will ask you what criteria do you want to use, and you'll need to be able to give an answer. Another thing that's taken for granted is the presentation. So once you have those search results, how do you show those? Is it just a simple list? Or do you give a list with a little abstract of each article or page that you're referring to so that people have a bit more context, that they know a bit more about it? Or do you maybe highlight the search terms where they're found? There's a lot of different ways you can do that. And again, it needs to be implemented and thought through. Refinement. So hopefully your content has some kind of metadata. We talked about that a bit yesterday, I think, at the workshops. And if you do, because what's going to happen is users will search for something, and they'll probably get 20, 40, 50, 100 results, depending on the search term and how big your help system is. So it really helps if you can drill down and get less results. And if you have metadata, for instance, if you tag stuff by user role, by skill level, whatever else, people can use those categories to get less hits and find that content that they want to have. So that's another really cool thing you can do. Maintenance. So sometimes, despite having a cool search algorithm, you're going to realize that certain articles or content simply doesn't turn up as high as you would like it to for frequently used search terms. So what you can do there is you can do a little hack or tweak in the background that you say, okay, if somebody's searching the word, variable, let's put these 3 topics at the top because I think these are the most important, even if your mechanism doesn't do that automatically. What you have to keep in mind, though, maybe a year later, those aren't the most important topics anymore. So you have to go back and continuously, let's say, review what you've done there. Otherwise, you're going to be giving outdated search results. And the last thing is performance. That's something that we just had, I think, recently. We had a nice search system. It worked. It was quick. And then we did a little reality test, somehow with like a couple of concurrent users, something that will probably happen once the system goes live. And performance went down dramatically. We're talking about half a minute for a search result. And that is not acceptable, of course. That's a good way to get users away from your search site immediately, because that's just not a good user experience. OK, so this is for the site search. Now, reality, however, says that your users will probably, in many cases, not even bother going to your site, but they'll go back to that internet search engine I was just talking about and enter your application name and a keyword and try to find your content there. So another thing you need to think about, I won't go into that in detail, is just think about also, give it a test, try searching your content directly from the internet and see if it's found. The typical trap is that your newest content won't be found, but that user manual you put online 2 or 3 years ago will be found as the top hit. And that can be very upsetting because you're completely misleading users. And I think more people go this way than we imagine. I mean, who's done that before? Search for documentation just directly? I mean, I definitely have. via the internet search engine. So don't always rely on people going to your site. Okay, another way out of the findability issue, though. Search, I think, is important, but an organizational structure can also help. An organizational structure, if you're writing, I don't know, a wiki, or if you have a PDF format, it's basically your table of contents or the content tree you have. That could be sufficient, but if you have a lot of content, you're going to have a TOC that's just super long and not particularly useful. You might say, hey, we have search. Nobody's going to look at this anyway. Why should I waste my time building this? But I think there are a couple of reasons that speak for creating an organizational structure. So by search, you always have to put in a search term, but if you don't know what you're looking for exactly, if, for instance, there could be something about a newer technology that users aren't aware of, they're never going to find it because they just don't have the right terminology at their disposal to look for those topics. So stuff can get lost that way. And also, I think there are still a number of people who actually like to go into a doc set and kind of orient themselves and see, okay, these are the topics we have available. If you're an admin, you might go into the admin section, just see what are the chapters there. This is the information. And if you don't have that possibility, that's going to kind of be a blocker. Just to demonstrate what this could look like, as a more kind of visual-based system, what we're building is just a very simple grid where we broke it down into 9 areas. So here you can just get an overview of all the content that's available. Then you can click on something, for instance, the top right, developing. Then you come to a second level, so you can build hierarchies. But be careful with hierarchies. Once you get down to the 3rd or 4th, it gets really annoying too, and nobody wants to dig through that stuff. And where we're not doing so well yet is then on the final level where you actually get the individual pieces of content. This is an online system. This is where we still have to somehow put things together and figure out how can we present this better, because this is just a flat list of documents. But as Kate mentioned, we're on a journey, and here we're still traveling. Okay, final thing I want to talk about in the context of findability is see also or related topics, or we could just say links. Who uses inline links in their content? So almost everyone. I heard yesterday at the workshop that inline links should be used very sparingly because they do interrupt kind of the reading flow, and I agree with that. And some of you have maybe seen text where we have a lot of inline links, and that's very disturbing. But I think it's important to push users or point out the related content. Here what I'm thinking of is less of inline links, but really having kind of a dedicated box, maybe in the sidebar, where you point out the 4 or 5 important topics. It's kind of like when you go to a web shop and you're looking at a product, it will say, people who looked at this also looked at these 5 things, You might not have that algorithm to produce that automatically, but you probably know your doc set pretty well and what your users are doing, so you could suggest those topics and also help them get to their content. Okay, so the takeaways. Search is a must. If you don't do a search, you're lost. Really, search is absolute necessity. But on top of that, I do recommend to organize your content. If your TOC your table of contents is getting too complicated, redo it in a more visual way, like I showed, and you can maybe achieve better results. And last but not least, anticipate and link, to push people to the content that you think they will also be needing if they're reading one thing. Okay, so that's findability. Now you might ask, if I implement something like this, how do I know that it's working? And I think that's in the realm of analytics, and Kay will tell you a bit more about that.
Exactly. Okay, so analytics, everyone's favorite buzzword. Analytics, it's about finding patterns in your data. And it's about, like these pilots are, using the information that you have, the data that you have, to correct your course and really take you on your journey to your destination and correct as you go along. So I'm not going to talk tools. I know there's plenty out there, visualizations, heat maps, reports, all these different things. And that also depends on your situation and the questions you want to answer. So a couple of different related concepts. So measurements. Very simply, the numbers, the data points. So we published 7 documents this month, for example. We got 24 user comments. You have that number, and you can keep track of those. Metrics, that's putting it in context, that data point in context. It's about making a commitment, completing an action on that commitment, and then disclosing how you did. So your 24 user comments, great, you have that number, you can share that number. But what does it mean if there were 48 user comments that month? Well, you've only managed to answer 50% of them. Is that good or bad? Well, that's what you can keep track of over time. So why analytics? Well, analytics, finding these patterns. It's about using metrics to answer specific business-related questions. Why is that? Well, priorities. We all know this. You have limited time and limited resources. What are the questions that you want answered? What do users love that I should do more of? What loser documentation do I have? So, very smart people at the Norman Nielsen Group said, if you don't clearly define the goal, it's impossible to determine the best method to track performance. Just as building a feature to address the wrong problem fails, tracking the wrong metric will prove meaningless. And we've learned it's not easy. This is quite difficult. One thing you do need to avoid, vanity stats, vanity metrics. I'm sure you're probably aware of this concept. It's these numbers that make you feel good, sunshine and rainbows when they go up. You think, yes, great. The thing is, these vanity numbers, they're not the ones that can help you make decisions. And that's what's key. Sunshines and rainbows, we all need a little bit of that in our life. But we also need to make these strategic decisions. For example, total number of visitors to your site. Usually quite a large number, it goes up, you think fantastic. But how many of those people are accidental tourists who just landed on your site for some unknown reason? Maybe they followed a link somewhere else on the internet. It's not what they're actually looking for. They're not your customers, your users. They're not your prospective users. So what use is that information? You need to measure what matters. And try framing it with these questions. What, why, what? Okay, what is it that I want to know? Why do I want to know that information? And finally, what am I going to do with this data, with these patterns that I find? What can I do about it? So let's just break it down a little bit more. What do I want to learn? Okay, what loser documentation do I have? Okay, that's a big open question. Why is that good to know? Well, it's because I want to provide value to my users. I want to know what's not doing well, what people aren't finding, what stuff I think should be popular, but it really isn't. Nobody's looking at it. Why is that? So I have this information. How can I find it out? Well, there's a lot of different ways. As I mentioned, a lot of different tools that you can use. But this is about being creative. It might not be able to measure it directly. You're going to have to come up with proxy measures, a combination of metrics. Is it the number of page views, the amount of time they also spend on that page? Are they scrolling on a regular rhythm? Or at some point, do they start rage clicking around and just going, oh, they can't find anything? How do all these fit together to give you that picture? How do you implement it? Again, all these different tools available to you, but it's your question you have to have in mind. The question you want answered, not which tool do I want to use. Ask for help. If you don't know how to do this, someone in your company will. We found this out. Your marketing department. They're usually quite good at this kind of stuff and can help you apply it in your situation. How do you know if it's working? Again, this is where you might have to be creative. How can you check that what information, the data that you're getting, how do you know it's not just noise and random results that you're getting back? So think about, are there any tests, any checks that you can do to check that the information you're getting is actually useful? And what you're going to do with it? Of course, this big question, okay, do you allocate more time? Do you need more people to help you? Do you have to shift your priorities? What are you going to do with this information that you get? So, this is Deb Hoffman. She is the Guinness World Record holder for the most Winnie the Pooh and Friends memorabilia collection. So why am I sharing this with you? Well, it's because quite often you see, yeah, there's no point just collecting. Hey, I think Deb would disagree with you. She loves her collection. But it's more, okay, sure, just collecting isn't going to get you that far, but it's a great starting point. Get the measures in there, have that data available so that when you do progress, when you do have time, you have information to work with at the very minimum. Otherwise, you are just guessing, pulling numbers out of thin air. Of course, there is a bit of a caveat, as we all know, as we learnt. These numbers are open to interpretation. You have lies, damn lies, statistics, metrics, the results that you get. what the actual context is, you've got to be a bit careful and think, okay, what else could be involved? Is it popular because, I don't know, it was written by someone really famous, so they're driving traffic? Is it because it's on the landing page, so it's always there? As Dirk said, has it found its way to the top of the search results, so people automatically are going to click there first, when it's actually not quite the real picture? So, when it comes to this, have a clear goal in mind. What's the strategic business decision, business-related question that you want answered? Measure what matters. Sunshine and rainbows, it's nice, we all need that, as I said, but it's more about measuring what matters. And finally, context. So putting it in context, understanding, okay, what else could be at play here? So we're halfway through. I just want to have a quick show of hands. Who's enjoying this presentation so far? Hands up. Oh, yes. Oh, pretty good. Okay, so carrying on from this last point that I made about context, with all these different tools, they more or less give you numbers. But what about the story behind that, the context? Dirk, do you want to tell us some more?
I'll do my best. So, as Kate said, numbers are great, but they can be deceptive, or they just don't tell you much in some cases. Now, Kate just asked you to raise your hands, and I saw a big show of hands, and Kate and I are flattered, obviously, thank you. But now we're wondering, why did you raise your hands? Are you just being polite? Do you like the shirt I'm wearing? Do you like these great slides we put together? We don't really know, but we'd like to derive some kind of knowledge or action items from this number. We have a number of, I don't know, I'll say it was 90%. So I'd like to ask if maybe one or two people in the audience who raised their hand would just, in one or two sentences, like to say why they raised their hand. If we could get that feedback or information, that would be really cool. Any volunteers? We have one over there.
The information is very clearly structured and it's very coherent, and I'm finding a lot of takeaways.
Okay, thank you. Do we have one more volunteer, perhaps? That we have over here, I believe.
Hi, I like the fact that it's very visual. You haven't overloaded your slides with lots of text, so I can hang on to different concepts and summarize each piece as you go. So it's nice, discrete pieces of information.
Okay, cool. Okay, thanks to both of you for providing that feedback. And suddenly, those numbers have a totally different value because we have some things to hang on to. We have got the feedback that our visuals are being accepted well, and that we've put together a coherent structure. And that's going to help us the next time we do a presentation. We know that this is a strategy that we can follow. And this is kind of how you can bring value into those numbers, by bringing kind of a, let's say, qualitative level into that feedback. And I think that's what you usually need to do with numbers. You need to somehow back them up by some kind of more substantive information. So now, how does this translate into a documentation set that you're providing online, for instance, somewhere? I think there's two ways you can do that. One is kind of more passive, and I'll call that a feedback mechanism. So usually what you do is you'll have a button somewhere that just opens a small text field where people can type in something and they send it back to you. And I think that's the minimum that you should be doing, is kind of giving that open ear to your users so that they know that they can contact you. Be prepared though, you're not going to hear very many nice things via this channel. It's going to be mostly negative, what people are missing, what they need to have. People rarely take the time to say, hey, that was a great section. That's taken for granted if they think that. But I think this is really important, to have that, to kind of close the loop, to get that feedback. And it's helped me many times to improve content and just realize things that I didn't see were missing. You can also be a bit more active, though, to get feedback. You can do a survey, for instance. If you put it on your website, you might not get too many respondents, but maybe there's something like a user community meeting or a forum where you can be a bit more active soliciting feedback. And the cool thing about a survey is you can ask more high-level questions. You can say, how do you like our doc site overall, or the style our documentation is written in? Because that feedback you get, it's always going to be very specific, like the code sample has a typo, or there's information missing on this. But in the survey, you can ask much more high-level information. So that can be a really cool thing to do. And for the really ambitious, you could do a little face-to-face test. This is really what you probably imagine under the term user testing. So you could put together a little task, probably for internal people, that requires searching for a topic in the documentation, but also following, for instance, a task that you've written in the or a procedure in the documentation. And that can be very revealing to see how people work with documentation, and especially how big their attention and patience span is. I would say about this big. They read about the first 1.5 sentences of a section, and if they don't hit home, they're gone. So do this. I don't know if, has anybody in the room ever done this before? Yeah, okay. I did this once too. It's many years back, but it was really mind-boggling, let's say. Okay, so takeaways. Make giving feedback easy. Do a survey to get feedback on the bigger picture of your doc set, and try and watch users in action. So these are things you can do, but what's the problem? What happens if people don't give you feedback? What if people don't respond to your surveys? What if your colleagues constantly decline your invitations to do some user testing? You probably need a bit more engagement in the doc field, and Kate will tell you a bit about that.
Thank you. So, wouldn't it be great if every time you published some content, this was the response that you got? People screaming, the roar of the crowd, a confetti cannon. No, just me? Okay. And what Dirk mentioned is, there's something I'd also like to just spin around. When you hit publish and you get this feedback and it's mostly negative, that's fantastic. I know that sounds a bit strange, but people, they're reaching out to you because they care. They have the answers. They can help you. They care. That's why they're telling you. Always have that positive spin in mind. So, some other ways. How about some eye candy? I know Gosia mentioned we had some like designers, graphic designers. That's also something to keep in mind. As you said, someone said, no, the visual aspect. It's really important. The content, the words on the page, we know. We know how important they are. But how about providing some eye candy as well? What about the font size? Is it actually readable? The colors that you use. What does the page look like overall? Have you got all these different things all over the place so when people actually look at it, they're already a bit exhausted. Then they're like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll go through here. Whew, that was enough. Keep it simple. Keep it clean. Try and minimize. Does it also work across all the different browsers that we have? Those Internet Explorer users, are we also treating them well, alongside Chrome, Firefox, Opera, Safari, whatever people are using? And does it work well on different devices? I have a beautiful big display, looks fantastic to me, but when I start going on mobile, then things start breaking across lines and the images don't resize properly. So why are people going to think, oh, yeah, no, they're going to be interested in what I have to say if on mobile it doesn't even work correctly? Think about the eye candy aspect as well. Then who's felt like this? Weight of the world on your shoulders. How about sharing some of that burden? If you do something great, tell people about it. You have a company intranet, maybe you're using Slack, you definitely have email. When you've produced this great content, tell people about it. Say, hey, you know, look what we did this week. We wrote this, we updated this, we had feedback from 3 people, and we've done it. How great is that? Share what you're working on. The communication aspect of technical communication. Getting people to contribute, it's not easy. We know this. They also have time constraints. But your technicians or your professional services, depending on what your product is, they work with your product. They work with the users. They're a great source of information. But time, yeah, resources. But they don't need to provide you with a fully proofed, perfectly written document. No. How about just some bullet points on a PowerPoint slide that they've put together? Then you can take this away, go do some research, ask questions. Or how about they just do a screencast? They talk through it and click around. Then you have that, go back, watch it later. Have a video mailbox people can just send stuff to. But, of course, it's about the relationships that you have. And again, it goes back to, if you've been sharing what you're doing, people see, hey, cool. I send them an email, I tell them something, they react to it. They're more likely to help you out in future. Finally, how about getting people focused on your documentation? We've heard of hackathons. How about a docathon? Even if it's just for one day, having people from different departments focused on the documentation. Have a goal in mind. Do you want to make sure that everything within a certain set is up to date, reviewed, done? Do you want to analyze, have people help you analyze, you know, what's missing? Oops, we forgot to do that. Oh, great. Focus people, even if it's just for one day, on you and your content. And Going back to the communication aspects of people help you, again, share it internally, externally. Reward them, say thank you. And finally, I don't know if you know this phrase, if the mountain won't come to Mohammed, Mohammed must go to the mountain. So going back to that analytics, those questions, do your users really need to come to you and your help site? How about you go to them? Could be improving the tooltips in the product. Again, we all know, not many characters, but you can squeeze some useful information in there. They have the limitations, but they're great. How about more contextual help? So if I'm playing around with the koala widget, if I need help, the get help link, it takes me directly there. It doesn't take me to some landing page where I've got to search or navigate through. I'm already there. And finally, how about in-app, if that's what you're working on, help? That can also be a lot more complicated. But again, it's back to that question. Do you really need your users to leave whatever they're doing, go somewhere else, and then go back? Is that how you want to be helping them best? So, delivery. Eye candy. Does it look good? Is it visually impressive? Communication. Share what you're doing and thank people whenever you can, even if it's for something really tiny. Makes a difference. And finally, travel. Who needs to go where? Do they need to travel and come see you? Or can you go see your users? Dirk?
Yes. So, and herewith we come already to the end of our presentation and our recommendations how you can avoid falling into the so-called loser documentation trap. So think about findability, take a look at the analytics, be sure to supplement those analytics with some solid user testing and qualitative feedback. Last but not least, think about how you can create more engagement on your site, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, I think, and that's where the real value comes in. Okay, the last thing to say is we've covered a lot of ground here, superficially in some cases, but you know, there's time limitations and we've probably been talking too long already. So what I would recommend is, you know, don't get intimidated or paranoid over all of these things and see it as there's just way too much to do. Just get started, select one thing, work on it, and move on to the next, because that's what we're doing too. I think in none of these areas have we achieved what we really want to achieve. We're making progress, but it's really a journey, as Kate emphasized at the beginning, and that's what's important to keep in mind. So enjoy moving there, and thank you for your attention. So I think, I don't know, do we take questions now or, okay, so.
Questions? Hi. Hello. How do you organize a documentation hackathon? I mean, how you organize such a session with developers? What do you ask them?
So it's a very good question. It depends on what it is you want to achieve. Do you want a certain topic to really, has it been neglected in the past? Do you have people working on that topic now, or they can help you really focus on one specific topic? Do you want a more general approach? Do you want someone from a different department, like you've mentioned, developers? Could you also ask maybe someone from marketing to give a fresh eyes if it's beginner documentation, for example? It's about finding the time, and that is, of course, incredibly difficult. How do you get them to understand that, you know, just focusing one day, the results that it could then snowball and the value that it brings? I don't have all of the answers. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, but do you sit them and read through the section, or?
That's the thing. It depends how you want to organize it. Perhaps ask them over a period of time, say a week before. Okay, let's go through. You can flag up on a wiki page, for example. These are the different topics that I find interesting, I think we should cover. But it's open to you because they're also working with your content. They also have ideas. Brainstorm the ideas in advance, and then on the day, or maybe the week before, depending on how you want to do it, ask people to vote, okay? Form teams, maximum 2-3 people on each topic, for example. You can sign up who you want to work with and do it that way. So give people themselves, they can choose, so then they have that motivation. I want to work on this, I have the time now, let me do it.
Okay, can I now? My question is about what the whole process looked like. Was it more like evolution, continuous improvement? implementing little tweaks bit by bit, or was it more revolutionary? Okay, we need to sit down and turn our content upside down.
To put it short, I think I would call it something like trial and error. So we sat down, put something together, we thought, great master plan, this is going to work. A month later, we kind of just realized, okay, a lot of things are not working, we need to turn around a lot of other stones, we need to find other things. So I think it's important to kind of approach this kind of problem in an iterative way and accept that you're going to go down some wrong avenues and make some mistakes and turn up with some stuff that sounds really good on paper but just doesn't work. So there's no way to build the master plan. And you know, the recommendations we gave, I think you always have to check them in the context of what you're doing, because each situation is different. You have a different doc set, you have a different audience, and you really need to take those things into account. And some things just have to be tested. You know, give it a reality check and realize what's working and what's not.
For us, I think it was a bit of both, an evolution, definitely. Some things, for example, the responsiveness, it became clear to us it needed to work across all different sizes, because that was where a big problem we were having. Our professional services team was saying, hey, look, I'm on the train, and I'm having to go like this, backwards and forwards, to even try and find what I'm understand what I'm reading. So it was a bit of both, and I think it's clear it's always ongoing. You're never going to reach it, because there's always going to be new ideas that you can learn from, new things that you can try.
Okay, I have two things. The first one is addressing the Docathon. We call it Doc Day. Yeah, we do it normally during the creation of a product twice. We have a fixed schedule. Doc Day is a milestone, and the developers and all the technical people that is involved in a product in a certain area, they get 1 day to really read through the content we deliver. We have it on our doc server, which is available for everyone, and they can give a precise feedback for their area of expertise, and it works very well. So the second thing is, you said, of course, and I'm completely with you, talk about your stuff. Are you working with marketing here? Is this a collaboration, or are you on your own?
So me, we're on our own.
Your company, so is it collaboration between several departments?
We address different audiences. That's been made very clear. So we're not about generating leads. We are very much focused on the people who already use it. So
talk about your content. That's,
the content, exactly. Mm-hmm. So we do share it, some of it via marketing channels when that's appropriate as well, but it's more the people that our target audience, basically, targeting the right people and letting them know what we're doing.
Okay, thank you.
I got one more question.
Yeah, we still have time for one more question.
Analytics, a beautiful word that means everything and nothing. Could you give an example of 3 analytics that you measured in the past and gave you meaningful results?
Wow, that's...
You got us!
Okay, I think we don't have time for this question, right? No, I'm just joking.
No,
we do.
Yeah. So I think that the most trivial one is obviously just looking at the number of page hits. And again, that is open to discussion what it means, but somehow it means people are looking at it and it's getting a lot of exposure. So you should make sure that that section is reasonable and is doing well. And if you ever have time to refactor, what are you going to refactor? That obscure topic that's gotten 3 hits in the last year, or that other one that's gotten 500. So I think this one, yes, you can use it, and even if the reasons for those hits are not clear, it's still obvious that you should be prioritizing that in some way. So that's one I can think of. Kate, do you have?
So on that one, we actually had we have one article that has this incredible amount of hits. Basically, the guy that wrote it, very smart, and he linked it on his personal website. It was on Stack Overflow. So unfortunately, we found it was skewing everything else. We were like, oh man, the rest of our content, it's not doing very well in comparison, until we realized, yeah, but we're very specific. The other one about event tracking, do people actually get to the end of your article, or do they kind of drop off halfway through? Is that important to know? Well, yeah, if they only get to a certain place on a page, yeah, maybe there's something there that's stopping them from going any further. Then, where are they going after that? Are they then immediately going to support, or are they just bouncing? Are they leaving completely? It's also about working out How many support tickets are related to which areas of your content? If you're getting a lot of support tickets on one topic, that's kind of showing people are really using it. But on the other hand, it's showing, okay, you know, we need to make improvements there. If there's no support tickets and no one's reading it, okay, that's also an indication that maybe it's actually no one's using this thing. I know that's very, very brief and a bit superficial, but hopefully you've got some answers. Or again, the regular scrolling, that kind of indicates that they're reading, they're going through reading. Like I mentioned, the rage clicking, at a certain point, they just start clicking around like this because they don't know what to do anymore. Okay. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
And fantastic.
Thank you, Kate and Dirk.